Hello, welcome to Functional Flow Pilates. I am offering to you a basic FFP sequence for the spine, right? So this video is for you if you have been categorized as non-specific low back pain, right? And to know whether or not, if that's you or not, please go back to those questions that I asked in the email, because it's a great way just to make sure that we're not here to aggravate any underlying current or active disc or nerve conditions, especially in your spine, right? If you feel like anything nervy in the video, go ahead and press stop and seek out further medical advice, guidance, and attention, right? And that can always include me or your local practitioner. All right, so how do we get going and what are we going to do? So we are going to start with breathing because that's extremely important, because we're going to use breathing throughout our entire sequence. And then we are going to move all the ways and all the ranges into our low back and our mid back, because that's excruciatingly important. A lot of times that middle back doesn't move a lot and then ends up translating more force in your low back, making it work more than it should. All right, so we want to balance the system. So I'm going to have you begin here on the floor, on your back, and then I do have a block that might be necessary when we go into one of the positions. An elevated surface might be helpful for you, so you'll know if you need that when the time comes. All right, so let's get here on the floor. Can we get our ribs connected to the floor? And then I'm going to have you emphasize your breathing. So I like to just do a gentle wrap of my fingers around the ribs, breathing in through your nose and out through your nose. And you're going to work trying to expand out into your fingers. And then can you inhale, expand those ribs also into the floor, so the back side of your ribs. Very challenging, right? But I do know you have to feel it in order to control it. All right, so now we're going to go with our breathing into our next position, the pelvic tilt. So without over pushing into our feet, which is common, we don't want to drive our feet, we want to drive from the front of our body. So the bones of our ribs and our pelvis, we want to bring them closer together. And that's going to be some abdominal effort here in the front. Can you do that without overstressing your neck and your shoulders, right? We end up crunching and stressing when we're really here to think about lengthening the low back, right? By building up muscle connections in the front. So very small and challenging move to isolate in this lower half of your spine. And so now with your breathing, you're going to inhale, exhale, get a little bit more into that tilt, stretch of the back. Inhale and exhale. Maybe tilting 5 to 10 times. I always tell people with repetition, you should recognize that things should feel better, right? If it is uncomfortable in the beginning, that's okay. It might be tight. So after 5 or 10 times, it should feel better. If it doesn't, it feels the same, just give it time. Maybe play this video another day also and just let your spine adapt. Okay, so this is your precursor move for our next move, which is our bridging. So inhale and exhale, and start to continue to inhale as you lift one bone up at a time. It's an articulated bridge, so that means very separated, segmented. And then in reverse, I think this is the hardest part. Can your chest come down? Can your ribs come down? Can your mid back come down? Then your low back last. So all the while you're stretching through your spine very deliberately, though trying to control every level. Inhale up. As you peel, exhale, stand tall through your shoulders, right? No pressure on your head, no pressure on your neck. Stretch, stretch, stretch. That transition to mid to low is definitely the hardest for most of us. If you're also tight into your chest, which is common, right? Getting our chest to come down can be a challenge as well. So a lot of this, again, it's education and empowerment so you can have better control of your spine. All right, so that's our articulated bridge. 5 or 10 times, right? Might be stiff in the beginning. Should feel better with repetition. All right, so 5 or 10 times, right? Might be stiff in the beginning. Should feel better with repetition. All right, so 5 or 10 times, right? Might be stiff in the beginning. Should feel better with repetition. All right, so 5 or 10 times, right? Might be stiff in the beginning. Should feel better with repetition. We're going to work on our spine movement and rotation. We'll do it here to begin on our back. So knees up, hands out wider. So you can have your shoulder engagement, your fingers are to the floor, okay? Shoulder blades stay down. You want to keep that tilt that we started earlier, right? And then inhale, knees stay together. Small movement first. Exhale, back to center. Inhale. Exhale, back to center. Can you keep your shoulders grounded? Can you continue to breathe? Right? If you're holding your breath, you're starting to go beyond your body's current comfort of movement. Go back to your breathing, down-regulate that nervous system, take it out of its fight or flight protective stage, which it probably has been for a bit, especially if you've been in pain. And then see, little by little, can go further. So 5 or 10 times on each side, keeping your shoulders down. Again, just educating what you can do and empowering yourself on what you can do. All right, so we're going to continue on with spine rotation with more core connection in a seated position. So take your time, come up to seated. We're going to use our spine strength here. We try to ground through our butt bones, stack our shoulders and our ribs over our hips, right? And then create that length. So I'm just going to have you start with your knees bent. That way you're not putting too much tension on your hamstring and your low back. And then hands behind your head will create that continued stack all the way through the crown of your head. All right, so from here, embrace your stomach. You want to make sure your butt bones stay down, that your feet stay down. So keep a gentle pressure of your feet to the floor as you inhale. Exhale, twist. Think about opening up your chest by pulling that shoulder blade back, right? Do this without leaning back though. So right on top of each other, they twist. You don't have to twist far. Inhale, exhale. Do your best to keep your shoulders down. And this is work, right? Over time, I have people eventually do this with their legs straight, but bent is a great place to start. You want to isolate your mid-spine rotation and your low back control. 2, and 1, and back down. So go ahead and hug it in and give you an assisted stretch here for your low back now that we're building in blood flow and warmth into the space. Awesome. All right, so go ahead and then bring it in. We're gonna go to a side position called side kneel. And this is where the elevated surface comes into play, and I'll show you why. Right, so side bending and tension through our flank muscle and our side back is pretty common. And so what has been extremely effective is how can we actively lengthen and strengthen through our side. So coming up onto your knees into a full kneel, you're gonna reach one leg out to the side, right? You want it to be completely in line with thigh to thigh. And then your other hand is also in line with your thighs, but this is that elevated surface. It'll be very helpful to start here. Okay, if you come all the way down to the ground right away and you're feeling crunched into your spine, that's the opposite of what we want. If your butt is kicking back and unable to activate, that is not what we want. We want those hips on. So drive them forward. You want knee and hip in line with each other. And then here you can keep your spine really long, and then we can stretch into side bend. So bending that bottom arm and up and inhale. So the whole time you're pushing that straight leg down, creating that active stretch. And then we inhale and exhale. 5 to 10. Inhale and exhale. And this is one of those moves that everyone's like, oh yeah, I'm tight here. I need this, right? Maybe about 2 more. And last. And then do that same thing on the other side. Right, so it's a progression of positions that you can work into over time. But again, it's educational, right? What can you do? Right? What's hard? What's tight? And then over time, as you get more mobile, right, it's empowering. It's like, ooh, this feels better. I can move better. 5 or 10 on each side. It's too good. And then here's my last. All right, next position is on your stomach, right? A hard position for most, when we deal with low back pain. If it's too uncomfortable, you can place a pillow underneath your stomach here. But the goal is to stretch the spine. And we'll be on our elbows. So pull those shoulders down, tops of your feet to the floor. We call this Sphinx here. And what is commonly tight is our hips and our hip flexors, the muscles here in the front, right? So if there's too much tension here, it's going to pull on our spine. There's that connection of our hip flexor to our back, right? So we want to keep that length. So shoulders down. Can you stay here and just feel your stretch? For some, this is plenty. For some, it's already too much. So you're just going to go back down and work on your breathing here, getting your body adjusted, 5 or 10 breaths, okay? And then if Sphinx is okay for you, then hang out here, ribs in, stomach in, right? Your goal is trying to keep your hip bones down so you feel that stretch in the front of your thighs. If you're not feeling it yet, I'm going to give you one more progression option, not for all, but for some. So again, test the waters, see how it feels. Can you keep your hip down? A lot of times the butt comes up, right? So that's that education, that's your compensation. You want to keep your hip grounded, down. Shoulders drive, open up your chest, right? No compression to your neck. Don't hang out into your ligaments, especially into your neck. You want your throat long and open. And then stretch the front thigh, squeeze the back thigh. Stretch front thigh, squeeze back thigh. We call this our single leg kick here. Just addressing the whole leg mechanics and your spine control. For 2, on each leg. And 1 on each leg. Can you keep those hips grounded? And then let's go into a child's pose. So this one, most people know. You just bring your hips back towards your feet. You don't necessarily have to go all the way back. Like if you're feeling tight somewhere in your knees, your hips, or your back, and you're hovering, that's okay, right? Over time, maybe you can bring it all the way down, right? And so this will stretch any part of your body that's tight. You can reach those arms out, it'll stretch underneath your shoulders. A great way to really isolate that low back movement, though, is coming back on your elbows. Bring your head down. Your hips are over your knees, and then can we go back into that pelvic tilt? So this is a very isolated cat-cow variation just for your lumbar spine, that low back. Can you feel it? Can you connect it? Can you use your stomach muscles to bring your pelvic and rib bones closer to each other, stretch your low back, and release, right? If you feel like you're not getting much movement, that's okay. That's why you're doing this, right? You're here to become educated and empowered on how to improve the mobility of your spine. 5 or 10 should feel a little bit more comfortable with the repetition. And then bring it all the way back down. Stretch it out into whatever comfortable child's pose variation that's best for you. And my order here, since we did all these variations of mobility and twisting and side bending and going into rounding flexion and some extension, I want to stabilize the system. A lot of times when we unlock the system, it feels good, but we want to make sure there's enough core strength to keep it together. So earlier we did articulated bridge. We're going to finish with just our stability bridge. So all in one piece. Can you let your hips drive? So it should be a thigh stretch, ribs in, squeeze of the butt. And then we're just going to hang here, a few breaths, and then keep that stomach engagement as it all comes down in one piece. And inhale up in one piece, squeeze of the glute, stretch of the thigh, ribs in, stomach in. Right, nothing in that low back. We don't want any compression here. And down. And then maybe little by little, you're starting to see that, hey, maybe I can hold it up a little bit longer. Maybe instead of 2 breaths, 4 breaths, 6 breaths, right? We're here to bring in that overall stability, checking in that all those muscles are still working. And that's what it's all about, right? And that's what I believe that is kind of the secret sauce, the perfect recipe for everyone. The moves might be a little bit different, but the concept is the same. We want to mobilize and stabilize. And last. Inhale and exhale. All right. Go and check in with yourself. Get yourself up. Find yourself seated. See how you feel. See how you move. Right? Usually when we start to move better, we'll feel better, just as a byproduct of improving the overall control of your body. I hope this was helpful. Hopefully it was insightful, educational to understand what it is that you need to do with your body, and empowering to see what it is that you can do for yourself. So I appreciate your time. Reach out to me if you have other questions, and I hope that we can continue to have this conversation in the near future. Take care.